and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. This week we have a lot of contentious issues on our agenda. First of all, of course, the Indo-Pakistan relations post-Pathankot. Are some people right when they call Pakistan a terror state? And also the outbreak of terror in Southeast Asia. To do that, I have a panel of experts with me. I have Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian. We have Mr. Jaydev Ranade, former Additional Secretary, RNAW. We have Mr. Vivek Karju, who's been a former secretary handling the Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan desk and a former ambassador. And we have Commodore Uday Bhaskar, Director, Center for Policy Studies. Professor Nalapat, I'm going to begin with you. Would you, bluntly, would you call Pakistan a terror state in wake of what's been happening?
Well, I would certainly say that the Pakistan army has for a long time been using terrorism. And unfortunately, the army is the state in Pakistan to a large extent. It really started accelerating during the time of Zia-ul-Haq, when Zia-ul-Haq started embracing Wahhabism, and he started embracing this whole concept of jihad. Now, he was very active, as you know, in Afghanistan. And from the time of Afghanistan onwards, the Pakistan army has seen terrorists as auxiliaries. I mean, Jaydev here, Mr. Vivek Karju, Commodore Bhaskar, they know the whole situation very well. And the fact that, so from that point of view, what is happening is that the army, unfortunately, regards terrorists as part of their force. And they provide logistical and other help to them. And then what happens is these people have gotten into the narcotics trade. These people have gotten into the Hawala trade to fund their activities. So you have an army which is terrorist. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, the army is a dominant figure. So increasingly, I think people are coming around to the view that the entire country of Pakistan is a danger to the world.
Would you agree with him?
Well, I'd say that I agree with him, but I'd go
it's always dangerous to disagree with Professor Nalapat.
I'd go a bit further by saying that they're just a small step away from becoming a terrorist state. And I say that because not only are there a large number of terrorist organizations that are operating in Pakistan today, many of them aided and abetted by the army and the ISI, but I think there are a lot of other elements who are getting radicalized, and whom the IS or the Islamic State is trying to tap into and nurture. So I think that is where the people are going to find sanctuary, and that is when it will become a terrorist state. So I think it's just a small step away from becoming that.
Terror state. A small step away from being a terror state.
Look, the Pakistan army uses terror.
No secret there.
And what is dangerous is that terror now is part of the mix of its security calculus and policies against India and in the region. In this, the more dangerous element is that they have turned the entire theory and practice of contestation between nuclear states on its head. In the past, no nuclear state ever contested with another nuclear state by fomenting trouble, leave alone terror. Pakistan has used the acquisition of nuclear weapons as a license, and because it talks of what is it calls a nuclear overhang, and it says that if India responds through conventional means, it would escalate. The last point is that this doctrine seems to be being bought by the West, who are not concerned with India facing terror. And I submit that in India too, through a strange alchemy, we have reduced the threat from Pakistani terror from a strategic threat to only an issue of political management. That is why you have this ridiculous binary of talks or no talks.
Talks or no talks, I'll go on to the next thing, but first I want Commodore Bhaskar on this issue of, Pakistan being a terror state. How much of it is the government in the know of it? I mean,
I would go along with what all my other co-panelists have said and just extend it a little more. So what Vivek has said about the nuclear issue, just let me add that in terms of the discipline, I think Pakistan has the distinction of being the first country in the world to introduce what we in the jargon refer to as NWET, that is Nuclear Weapon Enabled Terror. The precise date is May 1990, when Pakistan acquires covert nuclear capability courtesy China. And that is when you see the intensity of terrorism against India being increased with a certain degree of abandon, because they believe that they now have a shield, which is the nuclear shield. And the global community, at least as far as the major powers led by the United States, were cognizant. They were aware of what was happening, but chose not to recognize it. So I think this is one of the features of Pakistan. And let me also add that, you know, what was being said about the army being the state in Pakistan. The other feature about Pakistan is that they invest in support to terror groups as part of larger national military strategy. And the sociological point to me as an analyst again is that to the extent that support to terror is deemed to be a deviant activity in the normal discourse or in the normative framework, in Pakistan the deviant has become the norm over a 20-year period.
You know, some thinkers and commentators and strategic analysts also in India have started talking of multiple centers of power in Pakistan. I think this is ridiculous. The only center of power which is effective, and certainly as far as India is concerned, is the Pakistan army.
Which actually brings me to my next question to you, Professor Nalawat. How sincere Nawaz Sharif, you know, because even with Vajpayee it was him, with Modi it is him. So is it just Nawaz Sharif, or is it that there is just one center of power?
You know,
that's
Priya,
the army?
I mean, Ambassador Karju knows Pakistan very well, and he knows that Nawaz Sharif is a cipher. I mean, Nawaz Sharif has as much influence over, let us say, a lot of activities in Pakistan as the ordinary citizen in Karachi or Lahore. Nothing more than that.
So did Modi go hug the wrong Sharif?
No, I think he's done a great gesture, and globally it's had a terrific impact, and that it clearly demonstrates we are the country that's reaching out for peace, and if we are given a slap, then we are the victims and we're not the aggressors. But I want to add to what Commodore Uday Bhaskar has said. The problem that is being faced now is that individuals in the Pakistan army who have got this Wahhabi mindset, they no longer regard themselves as being South Asia or India specific. They have signed on to this global Wahhabi jihad. And as a consequence, what's happening is we are getting reports now of Pakistan former army people going and training ISIS. See, in the past, ISIS used to be trained by Saddam Hussein's people. Now, that kind of training was a little primitive from the point of view of modern conditions. You know, artillery, tank warfare. Modern weapons have not been in the armory of Saddam Hussein for a very long time, and so they could not. Pakistan army has had the most modern weapons. They know how to handle them. They know about night vision. They know about camouflage. They know about cyber terrorism and cyber warfare. They've been trained by the Americans. They've been trained there by the Europeans. They've been trained by the Chinese. And they've been trained in the battlefield in which they're involved with India. So this is the danger, that now the Pakistan army people increasingly believe themselves as part of this component of this global jihad. I would say this global terror force. And they are now becoming an important force multiplier even for groups such as ISIS.
But the ISIS, I know Commodore Bhaskar wants to come in on that. But just moving on, just before that, subject, I think Ambassador Karju feels what he would call the soap opera of this whole soap opera of talks. So should we talk with Pakistan? You know, are we right in continuing the talk process, or should we just call it off?
Well, I think there's a unanimity here that repeated overtures to Pakistan have resulted in a very, shall I say, violent response, regardless of whom we've dealt with, whether it is Nawaz Sharif, whether it is Musharraf. In fact, just the other day you heard Musharraf's statement that we'll hurt India where it hurts most, and now again with Sharif this time. But I would say that in case our government today, Modi's government today, has thought it through, and I think we should presume that it has thought it through, then certainly it has extended a hand of friendship. It has been a very bold initiative, which certainly, as Professor Nalawat says, will make an international impact. But I think it also delivers a message to Pakistan that they must realize that he's taken a huge political risk, and if they don't respond, then they will be confronted with a very hard Modi government. I think if that message goes through and is conveyed in more ways than one, and I think it's apparent what ways there could be, then our policy would have, you know, we would have set in motion a new policy. But otherwise, I'm afraid this meaningless emphasis on whether we should talk or not, whether our foreign secretaries should meet on this date or that date, is irrelevant unless we see some tangible movement on the ground from the other side, which hasn't, by the way, it hasn't yet happened.
You're not satisfied with what's happened so far?
No, I think these are still very
Cosmetic steps.
cosmetic steps.
Professor Nalbat, also I want you to tell us a bit about Modi's psyche. You know, he says if Modi is hurt more, then he will hit back. There's that much Modi will take.
Well, actually, I'm not really very familiar with Prime Minister Modi, but to the extent that
I'm letting you get away with that.
Well, to the extent that I have studied him, it's very clear that he gives everybody a chance to demonstrate good faith. And once you show that you are not going to demonstrate good faith, then he definitely goes in for an option. We have seen that in the case of Nepal. In the case of Nepal, India was promised a fair constitution. And today you have a constitution that discriminates against half the population of Nepal in a very vicious way. So we have very clearly come on the side of those who want a fair constitution and who want a system in which 100% of the Nepali people, rather than about 30%, get power. So I think Prime Minister Modi is very clear on that. I think he has reached out to Pakistan. He's reached out to Nawaz Sharif. The problem is, quite frankly, that Nawaz Sharif doesn't control the army. Now, regarding talks, I believe the Prime Minister is correct in continuing the talks for a simple reason that talks are not the big issue that we're talking about. Pakistan army is not going to be scared off because they don't have talks. They would like that because then they can tell the world, look, India is being intransigent. India is being tough. India is refusing to dialogue. So I think not having talks with Pakistan is a wrong policy. I'm glad this government is now going ahead with talks. And even on the issue of Hurriyat, for example, I mean, the Hurriyat are a bunch of zeros. Allowing them to dictate whether they have talks or not was wrong. So I'm glad that the Prime Minister is now sticking to talks. At the same time, I'm very sure he is going to give a rope, but at a certain point in time, if that rope is not properly responded to, there's going to be a different option.
Different Modi. Ambassador Karju?
I've been very uneasy with the long rope given to the Pakistanis.
By this government or
By
successive
this
governments?
government. We're talking of this
government.
Concessions, to my mind, are not the best way of dealing with the Pakistan army. At Ufa, Nawaz Sharif and Prime Minister Modi agreed on a certain framework for moving the process forward between the two countries. The generals objected to that framework, and we agreed. Now, is that the right way to proceed? Is that what is meant by giving them a long rope? Because the Pakistani generals have a manner of taking that rope and taking it further and further, and the danger is that once you get invested in a process of this nature, you start conceding ground inch by inch. Where do you stop? Now, today what is happening? Today, we are so invested that even the postponement of the dialogue has to be shown as a mutual agreement. Here is a strange situation where diplomacy is becoming drama, suspense, and on one particular day, on this Masood Azhar arrest, protective custody, I would say it became farce.
I know you want to come in, but let me get Commodore Bhaskar also, then you can take on both.
Can I just add to
Yes,
what
please.
Vivek has said? One of the cardinal errors we seem to have made from UPA 1, UPA 2 into NDA 2 is how means have, in a way, acquired an identity which is greater than that of the ends. Meaning that engaging with Pakistan, not engaging with Pakistan, we remember what happened when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had the whole fiasco, if you will, when they had gone to Egypt at that point in time. Sharm el-Sheikh, and the reference to terrorism, etc. Now, over the years, I think the discourse in India has elevated just the process of reaching out to Pakistan as an end unto itself, which I think is actually misleading. Pakistan is a neighbor. It's a difficult neighbor. It is a deceitful neighbor. It has engaged in activities that have caused India grave concern and so on. Now, to me, again, it appears that maintaining a minimum level of contact at the formal diplomatic level is the bare minimum. What kind of content you put into it is your choice. And let me use the analogy of the sailor and say that over the years, and I'm going back to what was the relative success, which was Prime Minister Vajpayee. when we had the interaction with General Musharraf. And I think the January 2004 agreement was a limited success in terms of identifying what is the Indian objective. What do we want out of our engagement with Pakistan? We said, you will not support terror, any transgression would be dealt with differently. Unfortunately, to me, after that particular agreement, I think somewhere we lost sight of the objective, and consequently, whether or not you engage with Pakistan became an end unto itself. And the sailor's analogy is that normally when you want to turn a boat and you're rowing it, you row on one side and you hold water on the other. So instead of acquiring that capacity to ensure that Pakistan complies with what was a very minimum expectation from any two neighbors, that you will not support terror against me, we seem to have lost the plot. And whether or not we talk with Pakistan has become an end unto itself, and thereby we have ended up in a situation where every move becomes an objective unto itself. So I think we need some clarity about what do we want from Pakistan.
Okay, Professor Nalapat.
You know, I simply want to say that in my view, I think the Prime Minister has a very clear policy on Pakistan. And my understanding of it, it's very limited, but my understanding is...
But is it clear? I mean, we had that SAARC invitation, then he called off talks in Hurriyat, then he went to Lahore. There's a lot of...
Well, you know, there is a thread running through all that. And the thread, in my view, is you starve the Punjabi general and you feed the Punjabi businessman. I'm not going to use the term Rahil Sharif and Nawaz Sharif in this kind of a context. I think Prime Minister Modi is not the kind of leader who's going to agree to concessions on Siachen or Sir Creek or any of the so-called boundaryless boundaries which Manmohan Singh and even Mr. Vajpayee agreed to. In my personal view, Manmohan Singh and Vajpayee had disastrous policies toward Pakistan. I don't believe Prime Minister Modi is going to do that. He's a realistic kind of individual. At the same time, being realistic, he is telling the Pakistan side, look, you have so much to gain from engagement with India. You've got commerce, you've got trade, you will have hundreds of thousands of new jobs, you will have cheap electric power. You are going to ensure that Pakistan goes into stability. And that can only happen if young people are employed, that can only happen if economic growth takes place, and that can only happen with peace with India. We may gain a little bit of extra growth because of Pakistan. Pakistan will gain a significant amount of extra growth if there's good relations with India. I think that is the focus of the Prime Minister's policy.
Okay. Welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We are discussing India's options towards Pakistan and also terror in Southeast Asia. Ambassador Karju, you wanted to comment on is Modi doing the right thing, not conceding on terror, but trying to establish some kind of diplomatic, commercial, economic relations with Pakistan?
Look, that has been our approach all through. It is nothing new if Mr. Modi is trying this. In a sense, Mr. Modi has taken a leaf out of the Manmohan Singh Havana book. What did Manmohan Singh try? He tried to exclude terror and then carry on a normal relationship with Pakistan, showing that there are incentives of an economic nature. That failed. The joint anti-terror mechanism failed. Mr. Modi has tried to isolate it by elevating that process to an operational level through the national security advisors. Now that Pathankot is now a test of this. And there is an attempt going on to show that it will succeed. On the economic aspect, the Pakistan army at one stage was giving indications about 3 to 4 years ago, that it was willing to open the door on trade to a very, very considerable extent. But that has not happened. And therefore, the Pakistani businessman, to take Professor Saab's analogy, is entirely within the under the thumb of the Pakistani general, of the Punjabi businessman under the Punjabi general. I hope that will change one day, but as of now there is no indication, and whether Mr. Modi will succeed in this endeavor where his predecessors have not, time will tell.
Well, someone who knows maybe some of the answers,
Well, I think one of the things that we've got to look at here is, does the Punjabi businessman in Pakistan, does he have the necessary clout to bring about a change in policy? In my opinion, certainly not. Second, the Pakistan army has a huge business conglomerate that it runs. So they will look at everything from 2 points of view. One, is it in their overall interest to repair relations with India? To which the answer seems to be currently no. And secondly, whether it will benefit them economically. Well, I think the jury is out on that. So I don't think that by addressing this constituency, we are really making any new move. But as I said, unless this is backed up with some steel. I might also add here that if we look at India-Pakistan relations, it's not just this government, but right from the beginning, that we seem to be going on making concessions or adopting a soft approach, regardless of whether it's 65, 71, whatever.
President Arabat, no Ambani in Pakistan to influence the policy?
Well, I would say that, you know, the people are more important than business leaders. But again, may I tell you, we can look at it through the prism of South Asia, analyze every issue. You can look at it through a global prism. In my view, Prime Minister Modi looks at these issues also through a global prism. Globally, you can see terror has become an important factor in world geopolitics. The rise of ISIS has concentrated minds in London, Washington, Berlin, that were initially very tolerant of a lot of these terrorist actors. The Pakistan army is being seen as an existential threat not only to India, but to Europe. The LET, for example, is active in Europe. There are indications that Pakistani individuals are active in the United States, and they're now trying to help set up nests of terror there. So from that global context, it is a different situation from where Mr. Manmohan Singh did it. Secondly, Mr. Manmohan Singh is a little half-hearted in all his policies. Prime Minister Modi is very clear. He has had a vigorous policy of engagement, for example, with the United States. A very vigorous policy. At the same time, a vigorous policy, I'm not sure that Jaydev will appreciate this, of commercial engagement with China. So technological and strategic engagement with the US, commercial engagement with China, engagement with Japan. So from that point of view, India is in a much better position. But I think the government is seen with a lot of credibility as having a strategic vision. The United States, in my view, now looks at India no longer as a problem, but as a solution.
Okay.
China looks at India not as a threat, but as an opportunity. That is the change I believe Prime Minister Modi has created.
I'm going to give Commodore Bhaskar the last word.
One
Short.
sentence. Professor, the world's approach, unfortunately, to terror is still largely segmented.
May I just
Commodore
add to
Bhaskar,
this,
and also
much
the
as
global context.
I mean, I think much as Monu has outlined a very, I would say, positive kind of orientation vis-a-vis India, I have a different take when it comes to terrorism. I'm afraid India is alone in dealing with the scourge of terror, particularly if you look at the policies of the United States and China, who, when it comes to Pakistan and the Pakistani army's role, have tended to support Pakistan directly, as in the case of China, or turn a blind eye, as in the case of the United States, and I don't see that changing. So I'm afraid when it comes to terror, India is going to have to remind itself of Gurudev Tagore's line, Ekla Chalo. And to do Ekla Chalo, you need capacity, which is why I'm saying hold water on one side, row on the other, acquire capacity to make sure that Pakistan is either encouraged or compelled to comply.
You've reduced it to a political problem.
It isn't. I said your capacity
but
has
you
to
have
be
reduced it to a political
That is
problem.
current status.
Okay, but that's all we have time for now. Thank you for watching this edition of the Roundtable. We'll see you again, same time next week.